I think that modern day Jews place themselves in a corner when they use human rights as their argument. And this is going to sound terrible and it's going to sound blunt, and this might be the most controversial thing I say ever on a hot mic. Fun. It's one of those things that, no offense, but war is not something that's simple, and it's not something that's always fair. So when I look at Israel, usually I have a lot of different ways I approach the conversation, but bottom line, if I want to get to what I actually believe, it's like I was saying before, a country is created via treaty or via war. There's always going to be a losing party. Israel had a treaty. The treaty was not accepted by the other side. Then there was a war, which was a defensive war. And then there was another war, and then there was another war. And Israel still exists. So it's one of those things where you say, Israel got the cake. And there's winners and there's losers, and Israel should mitigate the loss. But to what extent? So, like, for example, look at Gaza. Once Israel had the whole cake, they had the whole cake. They had no reason to give up parts of the cake. And they said, you know what? We're going to give you a piece of the cake. We're going to see what you do with the cake. And then we saw what happened with the cake.
It was probably pita, not cake. But
we saw what happened with the cake. Yeah, well, and at that point, then why does Israel have any other incentive to get rid of any other parts of the cake? And when you look at, for example, the Golan Heights, they were annexed immediately, and no one questions it. No one says, you never hear people saying, and Israel should pull out of the Golan Heights. It was also occupied territory, but it was annexed immediately, so no one questions it. The issue why the West Bank is being questioned constantly is because Israel allowed it to be so.
100%.
And it's not they should or shouldn't.
The strategic error of the 60s.
It's leaving things in the gray that made things...
And once we're black and white, and like this is the...
And now once you're in the gray, that's where you have to use human rights. That's why I hate it when people say, well, which is true, Israel is the most, I hate to say it this way, Israel is the most humane occupying power. But Israel could have not been an occupying power by just annexing.
I'm going to dispute that too, and I'm also going to preach to the choir.
Sure,
occupying, I don't like the word.
I hate that word.
Because it's a misnomer. Would you have a pre-existing sovereign nation occupied by another? That's America into Iraq, going into a country that pre-exists as a sovereign country. But there's a lot of misunderstandings about the nature of what, just because it had the word Palestine, was there a sovereign government and country of Palestine that was illegally occupied by then? People have that narrative.
I know.
The anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism thing, just to frame this part of the conversation, because this is a big one. I have sympathy now more than I used to for the default position of the anti-Zionist who claims they're not anti-Semitic. Because while I would agree conceptually that if you examine it, you will be brought to that conclusion that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, for all the reasons we can elaborate on. The conclusion is there, and I think convincing. To those people, they're like, oh, no. Like, I don't hate Jewish people. I have Jewish friends. I have Jewish this. I'm against whatever this narrative is that I am buying into. And my question really that I think we should, that I'd want to discuss with you, and who am I talking to? No, but the question is, like, we can convince each other all day long of these arguments and agree and find them very agreeable. We've kind of been raised on them and educated on them, so to speak. But I think you still find, given the comment section on this episode, like that narrative, and I don't even like calling a narrative. There's things are complex, but it's losing. The pro-Israel narrative, or the case for Israel, is losing in what seems to be the younger generation, the public discourse, the default position. Free Palestine in Bella Hadid's posts, in the culture. It just seems to be internalized among the people who already support Israel, and reinforced among us who already support Israel and understand how to, and feel morally very comfortable defending Israel. Israel is at war. People don't think of it like that. It's a country at war, perpetually at war. Its existence is constantly threatened. They don't think of it in those terms. So, of course, you're going to say, I'm anti-Zionist. I'm anti some country. Like, Eddie Vedder shouting on stage, stop bombing people and blowing them up. This is, that narrative is winning the day. Yeah. So I'm just curious, like, the conversations we have amongst each other and patting ourselves on the back, is that productive, constructive? Is it effective?
So yes and no. I think there's two steps that you take for Israel activism. You have to look in and you have to look out. The reason why I do think it's productive is because we do have to look in. When I first got to college, if you asked me why I supported Israel, I can give you an answer. And most kids can't. And that's why I do a lot of speaking in high schools and middle schools, because people should have an answer. And they should chronically, they should always examine that answer. They should try to come to different conclusions, and they should challenge themselves. I challenged myself. I had a hater phase. Everyone has a hater phase. You do what you got to do. But then you have to look out. And you're talking about the narrative that's being lost, right? The losing narrative, because when we're looking out, we're losing. And the reason why is because the winning narrative is not going to be the palatable narrative. Because if you frame every single country the same exact way, it's also going to lose it. So the U.S. was a colonialist nation. The U.S. massacred natives. In a perfect world, the U.S. would go back to where it came from, UK, because we know where they came from, and give the land back to the people who were there before. Alas,
those people
things aren't like
before
that.
massacred the people who were before them. Yes, if you ask Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, but that doesn't even matter. The thing is,
We
that
were in a conquering society. That is what we did.
that's what we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Dinesh D'Souza.
but it's
He
just-
sounds like Kumail Nanjiani.
It's just every single country, if you scrutinize
Conquest.
its founding.
That was the way of the
it
world.
It was conquest. That was the way of the world. Again, it was treaty or war.
But
treaty or war, treaty
I
or
think
war.
it's a very crucial distinction when it comes to Israel to point out. You did say in a war there are winners and losers, but in a war of aggression, there are people who are moral, there are the defenders and the aggressors. And it all comes down to that, because war is bloody and awful and is a reality in this world, but the morality of war lies in who is the aggressor and who is the defender. And the pro-Israel argument, the case defending Israel, is taken from the position that Israel is defending itself. And oftentimes the story is started in the middle. If you walked into a situation and you saw
say this
some
all the
guy
time.
shooting another guy on the street and you started from the middle and you're like, oh my God, he just killed that guy who was just standing there. Well, no. You didn't see that guy, you didn't see the context of what that guy was doing to threaten this guy and his family or whatever it might be. You're starting the story in the middle, and that's where the narrative of the case against Israel starts, right in the middle. Oh my God, there's just a wall blocking people up for no apparent reason. Israel's just doing this for fun. There's no security. Like, they're just doing this, and they're the powerful, successful country. So let's go with they're the bad guys. I think that falls into the same anti-colonialist, anti-Western narrative. But we all know, we all agree on this stuff.
Yeah.
The question is, why doesn't that translate? And this idea of Israel as the country that's defending itself against hostile neighbors and aggression, and and when it gets attacked, those are the people who don't want peace with Israel, or at least the people representing those people who are attacking Israel have expressed that they do not want peace with Israel. They want to destroy every last Jew in Israel. So that seems so obvious to me, because we've been raised on these, we've been educated on these arguments, and then you give yourself a minute, and we said, you want to try to hear the other side. And then you hear of an attack in Israel, and you pull it back, and you zoom out again. You're like, nah, forget it. I can't.
Right. And then I go right back to that place of like, all right, it's my family, so do whatever needs to be done.
But you make it seem like it's just like, listen, I go with my tribe no matter what. And I still think you happen to be that the tribe that you're identifying with has a higher moral position.
I mean, I think
I do think that.
okay.
But
if I could just bring it back to the point I made before was, right, there's a law of human rights. And when you look at Israel with the law of human rights, Israel's always going to lose, because Israel's in the position of power. That's just how it's going to be. There is no perfect solution. What I do when I talk to college kids, when I talk to anti-Israel activists, when I have any sort of debate, anything, when I talk to someone who's questioning, I say, okay, I am the world. I give you the keys. You now have the keys to the world. You can make any deal you possibly want. Give me the solution. And you just walk them through this thought experiment, and every single time they come up with something, you again show them the wall that's been blocking. It's like, oh, well, obviously, there's going to be a two-state solution. It's like, okay, great. You think that either side will honor a two-state solution? Usually be like, well, I don't know, whatever. Then they'll say, well, the Jews should go back to where they came from. It's like, okay, where are they going? You tell me. And then when they say, even if they do say Germany or this, whatever, you say, okay, great. What about the person living in their house right now? Because they had houses, right? So it's you have to just go through each thing and show them how complicated it is. So if I could go back, like I said, when you look at it through the law of human rights, yes, Israel is quote unquote violating it. The difference is, like you said, as soon as Israel was attacked in a war that was defensive, it was no longer the law of human rights that governs. It's the law of war. Perpetually, up until this point, 77 years in or 75 years in, because that's just where it is.
So this is something I said to Ami, and I haven't actually heard this anywhere. I think I might have come up.